perspective on, you know, where we are with regards to particular sales tax, just to see, you know, where we are. Because if we, again, if we're going to a ballot initiative, we want to make sure that we hit that at the appropriate time, and, you know, not conflict too much with some of the major endeavors that are out there. So this finance group will look at that over the next half year or so. Then review. We have a little further out. I don't know if anyone's looking at this, but the next one is to look at capital and operating costs and revenues. And we have this out here a little further. And the reason we have that out here, it really begins in the fall of 2013. Because the community corridor study, they will be flushing out a lot of this in more detail, and we thought we'd piggyback on the work that our consultant's doing, so that's why it's located where it is. And then 4C and 4D is just looking at, they're doing more revenue research and more innovative financing opportunities that could be available out there. And 4F is one I'd like to just talk real briefly about. Evaluate incentives for municipal support. And what that means is, you know, several communities, they've, you know, because, you know, it's a regional tax, and many local governments are going to be involved in that regional effort, that, you know, you can't do the whole fixed skyway study at one time. You know, you can't build that out, you know, together. It'll be by corridor, and all that kind of good stuff. Well, some communities have looked at ways that they may be able to offer up revenue that is generated from sales tax or property tax, or whatever the funding source is, to communities in preparation for this fixed skyway system to be developed, like fixing infrastructure, roads in and out of where a transit station might be, or actual the construction of a transit facility, a transit hub or station or anything like that. So those are things that we're going to ask this subcommittee to look at and explore. I think it's a pretty unique idea, and it might even be as much as maybe it's money straight up for roads and bridges within their communities. You know, just enough that they can say that, hey, we're not being left behind. Why weren't we chosen first? Those types of things. So just something to think about. And last but not least is public education and marketing. What we would really like to do, we would really like to do a survey, do some polling within the region, just to get the initial reaction of the general public about some of the concepts that we're talking about. The concept of doing regional public transportation, concept of commuter rail, you know, whether they'd be willing to tax themselves to get this stuff, those types of things, so that we have a baseline that we can establish about, you know, who's in favor of this, who's not, and then we can begin to strategize on how we might be able to improve those numbers. So we'd like to do that over, you know, we have basically in the third quarter of 2013 to do that, get it out on the street, and then ultimately the public outreach will continue now until we get this operational sometime in the future. So that's what we have prepared as staff. I'd be anxious to get your comments and suggestions on what are things we might have to have omitted that should be in here, or maybe things we should take out. Leave it up to you.
Yeah, Steve. Question back on rail. Have we, this conversation's been occurring over several years now. To what degree have we already been incorporated with our railroad companies that operate on those lines that we're taking over? Where are they of the studies that have been occurring?
Oh, I see.
Yeah. I'm just sort of curious about what's their base of knowledge now as we think about building coalitions. Because frankly, if you don't build that coalition to get that early, all the rest of the work is for naught.
Yeah, no doubt.
Those of us that have done economic development can tell you that short of the Corps of Engineers, nothing is harder to work with than the railroads. Because they say, well, we were here first.
We built the country.
Yeah, we built this.
And they're right.
Yeah, that's good.
No.
Most of our towns around here have names that came from railroad engineers and stuff. Edmond and Norman folks built in? How do we start to build those coalitions early? Because it seems to me that we want to find out what's a win look like for them.
Sure.
And make sure that what we're talking from is the basis of how do you get what you are looking for in terms of driving revenues for your company, for your system, and how do we work with you on that. So I just don't know. I'm asking out of ignorance.
Right. No, I mean, they are aware that they have always been aware of the RTD process. They've actually been invited to participate, and
they were on our hub study.
I was just going to say they were on our hub study. We probably have a stronger relationship with UP, to be honest. We do have a relationship with BNSF, and we're going to work pretty hard through ODOT and their rail division because they clearly have a great relationship. But no, I think they're, if nothing else, they're curious about what we're doing. They've certainly left open doors that, this is, when we have talked to them, they haven't said no. That they always say that this is something that, that we need to get more information on what exactly you're proposing, but they have not shut any doors.
What I've heard in all the time I've been involved with the north-south line, the BNSF, Edmond, Norman, Oklahoma City, BNSF really wants to have full double tracking of their line all the way from Texas to every place they can get it. And currently, it's not fully double tracked. And that's a big incentive if an RTA was willing to have the funding to, because you'd have to double track that line plus third line sidings that are out there. And that's a benefit to them, is to have that additional track. The UP, the discussions we've heard, their main thing is they don't want any shared operation. Again, if you could figure out a way to run a second track. But the north-south line has the most traffic, and everybody's aware of that in Oklahoma City. 40, 50, 60 trains a day. The UP line's just a few a day, and then the line that runs the old Frisco line from Tulsa that goes out toward the airport, that's operated by Stillwater Central, and it's like 2 trains a day. And so it's really the north-south one, and I think what you've got, the argument you've got, is helping them double track that.
Yeah, and that was recommended in the 2005 fixed driver study, right, Rick, to double track that. And we do think that that is something that they're very interested in. They recognize it as a priority corridor for them. And, that's something, if we could bring public money to the table to double track it within their existing right-of-way, that it's really a win-win for all of us. I mean, it's all about, they don't want there to be a disturbance of movement of freight on their existing facility. Everybody can understand that. So, yeah, and there have been discussions with them about that concept. Right.
Doug, at what point are we going to hear more about the land use planning? I mean, we're looking at a long time period. We might need to put rail stops in certain locations that are currently vacant, and if we wait too long, it may become expensive to buy up. So, at what point are we going to hear about the best locations?
Yeah, within the next year or 18 months, that's going to be part of the corridor study that our consultants are doing. Yeah, it's a pretty large component actually of it. That we'll be looking at actual station locations and possible economic development opportunities around there, and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, the land use component of that will be flushed out a little more.
What's the ability to? I've heard some discussion about using local small TID districts for station areas that the municipalities can use.
Yeah.
Is that something that can be discussed as part of that?
Yeah, it is. That's something that's going to be discussed. Part of the innovative financing center and economic development aspects.
In partial response to Tom's question, I know, at least I know in Edmond's already conceptualized trailhead development in the area, looking at concepts for retail and living and all that within where our rail station would be. So some of that's actually occurring in the dreams of municipalities along the way. So some of the land use, those land use sites are at least being contemplated in Edmond. I know, I don't know about some of the other pieces.
Doug, would it be good to remind everybody, the RTD1, it's been a couple of years ago, the technical land use came out with a great packet of recommendations about what the individual cities and municipalities can do to consider things in their land use planning that outreach can do to help facilitate these types of things in the future? Should everybody be made aware? That's on the website?
It is on our website.
Okay.
It needs a little updating, but it is. Roy, did you have a question on that?
Yeah, I was curious, is there any good current intelligence data, specifically polling now, out there about, especially looking at the geography we keep talking about, representative of that geography, about attitudes toward this stuff? I mean, kind of Cliff's point about, I'm not sure yet what we would ask people what they think about, because I'm not sure what that is. But it's been our experience that a lot of times before you start shaping whatever it is you're doing, you want some input, because that helps shape it, instead of shaping it and then asking people what they think about it. So my question is there a sense of where the populace is on pieces and parts of all of this?
I don't think so, Roy, to be honest with you. I mean, I haven't seen anything, certainly on a regional level, I think now. There, Oklahoma City, you guys do a survey annually, and, transit always ranks fairly high in wants. But outside of that, there really isn't. I mean, the survey work, and Marion showed a slide, from one of our surveys we did. I mean, that wasn't statistically valid, but it did give you some concept and, certain technologies that were more appealing than others.
How big of an area did 2035 survey?
That was our whole study area, so.
But it just wasn't scientific.
It just
No, it was open to everybody, and it went viral. We had 2,000 inputs, but there was no way to filter it out.
But I think that's a good comment, though. I mean, maybe we do need to move up that polling into the, the spring and do that.
Yeah, I think if you get too far down the road, you get created some expectations, and then the public might say, that's really not what I'm comfortable with.
Right.
And then to unwind it, you got a real problem.
I do have a question about that. I agree that we need a poll, but there is such a misconception between light rail and commuter rail. How do we get accurate data in the polling? Because some people, when you say commuter rail, they have no idea what you're talking about. They assume it's light rail and vice versa.
And the costs are so different.
Yeah, costs are different, functions are different.
Right.
So
You got to have a really good pollster.
yeah,
We've got to ask the question.
good wordsmithing.
Well, it may be that focus groups need to be incorporated into the study, because there may be some level of education that's necessary. But I think it's a good point. I'll say one other thing politically, because the political animal that is involved here is equally compelling and important to the actual building of all this stuff and getting people to write it. And when you look back at this area's history and the success of MAPS and its offspring, I find it interesting that MAPS and MAPS 3 were very streamlined approaches. It was a city voting base, it was downtown-centric projects, and it was a sales tax. Real easy to communicate. You could decide yes or no, but it wasn't complicated. This reminds me more of Maps for Kids, when the leadership of the day, Cliff being amongst the highest levels of leadership, along with Mayor Humphreys, had to bring together the school boards, superintendents, and principals of 24 school districts, as well as city councils throughout the metro area, because you can't have, even if people aren't directly involved, you can't have them out expressing negativity about it. And put your arms around this giant historical entity called education. And here it's transportation, and it's cities and city councils all over the place. But at the end of the day, very similar to that, it's going to take a tremendous amount of consensus building, because it takes about this much negativity to beat something. And if we can't get as many organizations and cities as possible to be behind it, it's going to get splintered and beat up, because there's going to be opposition to anything that involves taxation. And so I kind of like the fact that we kind of went through that once and won over insurmountable odds. But one thing I would add is there was an acknowledged perception in 2000 that our educational needs, especially the capital needs, really needed attention. People understood that.
They might not like the way they were asked to pay for it, but they understood the problem and acknowledged it. My concern here would be, is are people going to have that same level of concern about transportation and ownership of solving the problem, because it's going to take that. But I think all the animals here are very similar, but I think we can learn from that about how to go forward. Because, as has been brought up, all of this planning and talk is wonderful, but if there's no money at the end of the day, it's just planning and talk. You have anything to add to that?
Well, I would agree with your analogy.